14 points was the difference between McLaren and Ferrari at the end of 2024 season. But if you look at the numbers, you see that Ferrari lost a lot of points due to bottles or missing opportunities that they could capitalize on it and finally be world champions after 16 years of waiting. Today we're gonna talk about how Ferrari bottled the world championship. My name is Rafa and you're on the channel Overtake Available. Make the calculations to see how many points Ferrari lost and how many points they would be ahead if they won the champion, doing all these things right and stuff like that. We'll be doing two rules. That the first one is we will not be removing McLaren's points. So imagine that Charles finished P1 in a race that actually Norris finished at P1. We will not be removing points from Norris. We will just be adding some points for Charles. The second rule is we will not be accounting points that Ferrari bottled due to missing upgrades or doing upgrades that were not actually good for the car. So we will not be taking account like the Spanish upgrade, the flaw of the Spanish upgrade that made the car bounce like a dolphin. And we will just be accounting points that Ferrari lost on track due to driver errors or team errors. So let's get into it. Spain, the first race that Charles and Carlos start to battle on track and lose a lot of points for Ferrari. At the start of the race, Charles was doing well in P5, managing his tires, while Carlos was not doing it. He was attacking and being aggressive. Carlos attacked Charles around the outside of turn 1, while Charles was squeezed on the apex of the turn 1, making him lose a lot of time. This time loss on this battle cost Charles at the end of the race one position that he could have been gaining on Russell and getting P4 at this race. So the actual points was Charles made 10 points on the championship and Carlos 8 points on the championship. But the best result that the team could have gained was Charles doing 12 points and Carlos doing 8 points. So the actual points of the race were 18 points for Ferrari, but the best result could have been 20 points of Ferrari. And this was the first race that Carlos and Charles lost a lot of points. So driver errors on the team, and also an error for the team to not make Carlos know that Charles was managing his tires, so he shouldn't be attacking Charles. The second race that Ferrari bottled the championship was in Silverstone, where the car was not doing so well because the floor that they put on Spain was not working, so they were needing to run the car really high to stop the bouncing. Charles started P14 and Carlos started P7, 7 positions of deficit. At the start of the race, Charles did a lot of work on overtaking, making him being 8 seconds behind Carlos, where Charles was in P8 and Carlos was in P7. But the rain started to fall on track and Ferrari made the magical decision to put Charles on intermediate tires on a track that was still dry. So Charles dropped to P14 again and was not able to overtake cars because his tires was not the best ones for that conditions. The best result would be Carlos P5 and Charles P6 if Ferrari just waited for the best moment to put the inter tires, and Ferrari could have gained a lot of more points. So P5 more P6 is 18 points, 10 for P5 and 8 for P6. Azerbaijan, a track that suited Ferrari car way better than the McLaren car. Charles started P1 and Carlos P3. When they started to box, so Oscar pitted first and then after Charles pitted. Charles got to the track with hard and cold tires, while Oscar had already temperature on his tires to make some progress over the field and also to overtake Charles. On the turn 1, Charles was with the cold tires and Oscar made a dive on one hand and he could capitalize on it, making Oscar P1 and Charles P2. Charles did not defend it because he thought that he could gain the position again on straight, but it was not possible because McLaren has the mean DRS that they have, the flap that opens with the wind, and it was a problem. Charles was never able to overtake Oscar. The second point that this race that Ferrari bottled was with Carlos. At the end of the race, on the last lap, Charles' tires was nothing, and then Carlos started just to gain on the cars ahead, overtaking Checo in a good move where Charles was defending from Checo and gained the position again, while Carlos gained the position on Checo as well. But the problem is, Carlos started to attack Charles and making him vulnerable to Checo behind. Carlos just got together with Checo and both went to the barriers, and then the race finished. P1 Oscar, P2 Charles, and P4 Norris. So the difference between the best result and the actual result of the race was 14 against 18 points, and it's a large difference, so Ferrari could have been gained way more points that they had. So yeah, it was a lot other battle for Ferrari. So we arrived at Singapore, where Ferrari started to mess up with the tires on the qualifying, where Charles had a problem with his tires bended. So he went to the track, to the qualifying lap, with tires way colder than anyone else on the track. And also Carlos crashed into the Q3, making him start at P10. Charles also made a mistake on the turn 1, making him lose a lot of time due to a lockup, and then Charles started P9 and Carlos P10. If the qualifying was better, Charles could have even be winning this race, because Norris did a lot of mistakes on this race, and Carlos could have been finishing P3 because Ferrari pace was good on the second stint. It was even better than Norris at the first position. So yeah, the best result could be Charles P1 and Carlos P3, making them gain 25 more with 15 points, so it would be a gain of 14 points. And in the actual results, P5 with Charles with 10 points and P7 with Carlos with 6 points, making 16 points on the actual race. So we go to Mexico, a track after Austin that Ferrari made a 1-2, so the hype was high. Carlos started P1 and Charles P4, putting them on a good position to make a lot of points. Eventually, at the race, Charles was able to gain to second place, where Carlos was in P1 comfortable. But Ferrari just decided, oh, let's put Charles to do some lift and coasting and make him lose a lot of time. And it was what happened. So Charles made a lot of progress to go to P2, and then Ferrari started to make him do some lifting and coasting. And then this lift and coast maybe cost Charles on position, because Norris at the end of the race was catching, making Charles to made a mistake on the final corner, and then Charles lost the P2. So at the end of the race, Carlos P1 and Charles P3, making 40 points for the team, and the best result could be 44 points, because Charles could have been finishing in P2. So back-to-back races, we are in Brazil, where the rain just make a storm on the track. Charles started on P6 and Carlos started on P14. But well, the race could have been better. Charles finished at P5, maybe was able to finish P4, but due to an error, George Russell overtook him and making just drop to P5, while Carlos crashed on the race, so no points for Carlos. The best result was Charles P4 and Carlos no points, P4 doing 12 points and Carlos nothing. In the actual result, Charles was P5, 10 points, and Carlos nothing. But yeah, Ferrari could have been gaining way more points on this track. So we go to Vegas, a track that last year Ferrari was looking pretty good. Charles was able to get a P2 in a race that he could have been winning. But yeah, we are in 2024 and Charles is starting on P4 and Carlos on P2. The first corner, Charles goes to P2, dropping Carlos to P3 and start to attack George Russell. With this attack, Charles' tires just go to the hell, and after this, Charles started to drop positions and also lose the position for his teammates. So yeah, at the end of the race, Charles went to a two-stopper, and he had a better tires than Carlos, and Carlos was right behind him. So the team says to Carlos, do not put him under pressure. But Carlos did not hear that and overtook Charles, giving Max also DRS, difficulting Charles' overtake on Max, and also losing time to Hamilton. So the P2 and P4 was able on this race, but the team made the terrible decision to not communicate better with Carlos their plans, and also Carlos did not follow the team orders making Charles lose a lot of time and then making them lose the P2 on the race. So at the end of the race, Charles finished at P4 and Carlos P3. So this is 15 more 12 points, that's like 27 points, and the best result could be 18 points more 12 points, that's like 30 points. So yeah, more deficit of points that Ferrari lost and Bottas on the championship. With all these scenarios making into account, I calculated all the points that Ferrari did in these races and all the best results that Ferrari could have been doing on these races, and the numbers are the actual sum of points that the races went on and Ferrari gained was 139 points versus 204 on the best result. The difference was of 65 points. That's a big gap to 40 points of the actual result of the championship. I hope you liked the video and subscribe, like this video, and yeah, thank you everyone, bye bye.